webinar. Okay, recording in progress. Great. Thank you for coming and for being here about climate crisis, natural hazard, climate change impacts and countermeasures in the Black Sea region. My name is Renaud Layadi. I work for the Breton government. In fact, I'm advisor on climate change and climate negotiations. So I've been going to the COP for a certain number of years now, since 2006, and I'm afraid it hasn't moved much since then. We had the Paris Agreement, but still it's a long way to go. Welcome to this meeting. We will have roughly between 90 and 120 minutes. That's 1 hour and 2 hours, 1.5 hours and 2 hours to discuss about climate crisis. We have a number of questions that we would like to raise and to organize a discussion around. Hello, Tatiana. Welcome. Well, in fact, the best way to start would be to have a roundup of who's here, starting by, for example, Tatiana Kaminskaya, who just joined us, and then you will present yourselves to know who we are exchanging and discussing with. Please, okay. Oh, hello, but we don't hear you. Maybe you can fix, no. Anybody can hear the...
Do you hear us?
That's better.
Okay. We've turned on the microphone. Unfortunately, it was muted.
Okay.
We tried to connect through our computer and
okay. You want
we
a
have
couple
some
of
kind
minutes?
of problems.
You want a couple of minutes to get ready?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, then let's start by Mr. Economov.
Maybe I first have to unmute myself so that everything goes smoothly. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for inviting me to this honorable meeting. I am Lyudmil Economov. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Ecological Modernization. And my field of expertise is exactly climate change and disaster management. Generally, my background is environmental science, but some 40 years ago, I'm ashamed to mention that already, I graduated from the Technical University of Varna as a naval architect. But with time, my specialty became fluid mechanics. First, it was ship fluid mechanics, and then it became fluid mechanics in a more general sense in environmental science.
Okay.
So if I am just supposed to present myself or may talk, just please let me know. Just to present myself. Thank you.
That's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Baris Saliloglu, can you present yourself? Mr. Salioglu from Turkey.
Hello, and I would like to thank you for the kind invitation and organizing this great event. I'm the director of Institute of Marine Sciences in Middle East Technical University in Turkey. And I'm also the leader of Connect and Bridge Black Sea projects in the Black Sea. And my expertise is on assessing the effects of various stressors on the marine ecosystem. And one of the main stressors is, of course, climate. And as background, I'm an ecosystem climate modeler. And I work both in the regional seas and on the global ocean.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Megalidze.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, again. So I'm Irakli Megrelidze. I am representing the National Meteorological and Hydrological Service of Georgia, which is the under the National Environmental Agency. So I'm holding the deputy head position in this hydrometeorological service. So my background is that I'm a geographer, and so my main activities related with the DRR, with the disaster risk reduction, with the early warning systems, with forecasting, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Arutyunyan.
Yeah, the surname is more complicated than name. So
Diana.
yes, I am by my education biochemist, Doctor of Sciences in biochemistry, but 20 years I'm working closely with the Ministry of Environment and as UNDP expert supporting the climate change program management. And also have been involved as an expert in the Armenian delegation for COPs and hopes to meet colleagues also in Glasgow. And of course, the climate is affecting the Armenia as well, and all their reports and the preparations of the adaptation planning is under this program in Armenia. So I am aware about the problems and will share with colleagues that.
Thank you. I'll keep going with the same name, Valerie.
Yeah, my surname is just complicated, I see. So I'm Valery Khekhlov. I'm from Odessa State Environmental University. In university, I am a vice rector responsible for educational methodology. Also, I'm professor at the Department of Meteorology Climatology, and my main field of expertise is regional climate change and their impacts on the various fields of economy. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Alexander and Tatiana from Sochi.
Hello, dear colleagues. We are the team from Sochi State University. Let me introduce our speakers for today. It's Alexander Volkov, our PhD in technology. He's the Dean of Engineering faculty, and also Tatiana Karminskaya, also the senior researcher and PhD in technology. Thank you for having us for today.
Thank you. And finally, Lazar Komanescu just joined us. Maybe I guess that you will want to say a few words. Can you switch your mic on, please?
Yep.
Mr. Komanescu?
Yeah,
yes.
I think it's okay now. It works, yeah?
Yeah.
So, sorry for the inconveniences I produced in getting a little bit later into the web, but you know, all these technicalities, and I just arrived in at the hotel, and until I arranged everything, it took a little bit of time. Well, I will start by saying that I'm very much pleased to be with you today. And well, I'm the new Secretary General of the Black Sea Economic Organization Permanent Secretariat. I've been there in this function for now 3 months and 10 days. And I'm looking forward to, with particular interest, to listen to the panelists today to help me learn and better understand the challenges we here in the region of the Black Sea are to cope with. So that's for the time being, and perhaps later on I will say a little bit more. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will get into our subject now. We will try to be to have some discipline and to only speak for 3 minutes, because we want everybody to have an opinion and to have some information to share. So what we will talk today is about climate crisis through different points, the challenges, when was the climate crisis, when did it appear, what is the level of decentralization? That's a very important point to see how we can cope with climate crisis, the emergency plans that have been put together, the exchange of data, which is also pretty important, because I guess that we will have more or less the same type of crisis according in the various countries. Also, the dialogue between policy and science. This is also a very important question because we need some background to be able to be effective. And if you think that there should be some kind of regional mechanism to encourage information, scientific information, data sharing between countries around the Black Sea. So maybe the first question, 3 minutes for all of you, about climate crisis in your own country. What is it? It's a very broad outlook that we want to make. It will be from drought to sea snot. I learned the name recently, to sea snot. So let's open the debate, starting maybe by you, Baris. How do you see in your country, on your side of the Black Sea, how do you see climate change and its consequences?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Turkey is surrounded by 3 regional seas. When we look at these regional seas, we see that the manifestation of climate change is above how it manifests in the global ocean. For example, in the Black Sea, we have seen increase in temperatures of water surface temperatures up to 2 degrees, whereas the global average is a little bit above 1 degree increase. In Marmara, this was 2.5 degrees in certain areas. This is a huge increase, as you can imagine. And also the ramifications of this in the Black Sea is huge. For example, as you may know, Black Sea is 90% anoxic. Below 100 meters, the waters are anoxic. And now what we see with these changing temperatures, for example, rim current is changing. There was an intermediate layer in the Black Sea below the surface, which was in a way blocking this anoxic layers coming to the surface. We see that it's disappearing because this water was forming during cold times of the year, during winter, and winters are not as cold anymore. So this layer is completely disappearing, and we see that anoxic waters are getting closer to the surface. These are real crises, and they are very important to understand how this mechanism works and how this will affect the ecosystem. And because we cannot do much about this increase in temperatures, of course, we all can do a lot about the global warming. But at the end, this is a long-term process. But in the short term, we cannot do much. So what we need to do is that we need to minimize the other stressors on the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is more resilient to these changes in the climate. And Black Sea is one of the areas where many stressors are acting on the ecosystem. Climate is one of them. As I said, anoxia is another one of them, and pollution, eutrophication, fisheries, I mean, even acidification, these are all stressors on the system. And we need to develop plans and strategies to lessen these. Otherwise, the ecosystems will not have any ways to cope with this changing climate. And very little about Marmara, maybe, sea snot. As I said, the increase in temperatures in Marmara were very high, but also pollution effects were extreme. There's 20 million people that are living around Marmara. And the main 2 reasons were this pollution and the effects of climate. And this came out as sea snot, which was a a big disaster, really, and it had a lot of socio-economic implications for the region as well. And I can elaborate this later on.
Yes. Coming to Bulgaria, Lyudmil, would you say the same? You have the same problems as in Turkey, would you say?
Well, I believe problems are everywhere in a way similar, but maybe not everyone has the same challenge or the same level of impact caused by climate change. I would like to start with the damage which we suffered in Bulgaria, and starting with the number of people who have died in the coastal area. In the coastal area only for the last perhaps 7 years, we have 13 casualties. 13 people have died. Actually, 13 people only in the city of Varna. Altogether, there are 18 on the coastal line, due to floods. What we see in my country is perhaps what we see everywhere. This is the sharpening of the so-called climatic contrasts, very wet periods, floods, followed by dry periods, by forest and field fires, sometimes even problems with supply of drinking water for the population or even for the businesses, for the industries. So this is the kind of problems we have. One thing which might be interesting is that in 2017, we had 741 fires in Bulgaria. And we had 159 floods. So the number of fires was 5 times bigger than the number of floods. But the damage caused by floods was 110 times larger than the damage caused by fires. So regardless of what we want, we have to direct our attention actually to floods, because this is the most devastating impact, the most devastating event caused by climate change. Challenges. Speaking about challenges, we see that the measures which we use to prevent, to mitigate flood risk are not really effective. And this is probably because our focus currently is on hard construction measures. To put it straight, our focus is on casting concrete. We're trying to somehow to correct the riverbeds. We are trying to fence the banks of the rivers with concrete, especially in urbanized areas. And this is something which is, concrete is easily managed by water. I mean, it's just enough for water to undermine the base of concrete, and it breaks down under its own weight. So this is not really the perspective way which has to be used in the future. And it is not by chance that the European Commission has a very strong focus on so-called nature-based solutions. These are solutions which are used by nature itself. And these are actually the type of solutions which you have to widely implement, not only in our country, but I believe in the whole Black Sea Basin, because these are measures which take example from nature. They basically repeat what nature does. They're much more stable, much more sustainable, if you want, in time. They're much more effective. They add a lot to well-being of the population. They improve human health. They improve the health of biodiversity as well. So these measures, what does nature-based solution mean? First of all, we have to provide more room for the river. In modern days, we have put the rivers into too narrow boundaries, so to say. And it is not, of course, unusual for rivers to overflow, to flow beyond those boundaries. So we have to provide room for the river. Then we have to provide to restore previous wetlands. Of course, there must be a balance, because a lot of wetlands, marshes in Bulgaria have been dried up because they cause a lot of health problems. They cause a lot of defragmentation of territory, which is an economic problem as well. So there must be a balance between restoring old meanders of the rivers, restoring old wetlands, planting new trees, and of course the contemporary economic requirements which we have to meet. Now, this is a new philosophy, and this new philosophy requires a lot of effort on behalf of the local authorities, on behalf of the regional authorities, on behalf of the politicians, because these mechanisms are not easily understood by the population and by the decision makers. If it's concrete, if it's a wall, if it's a dike, you see clearly what is happening. If it's a floodgate, again, you see. When you have to introduce some system of dynamically redirecting water so as to avoid vulnerable places and to avoid flooding of expensive areas, then it is not absolutely clear exactly how it works. And there's a certain barrier. We have to explain this to local authorities, we have to explain to the people. Yeah. And this is something which requires a lot of political effort. So this is actually where we are moving forward. Now, this is, of course, tightly connected with the issue of collaboration between the academic sector, first of all, the academic institutions between themselves, and the academic sector and the local authorities or regional authorities.
Okay.
I'm not sure, okay, maybe I have to stop here, but this is a very interesting thing about the new paradigm of universities which the European Union is actually imposing. This is really important for the collaboration between local authorities and the academic sector, but probably I have to stop here to give from
We'll come back. We'll come back.
Sure, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludmila. Valery, would you agree with what has been said in Bulgaria? Do you have more or less what you see, what you experience in Ukraine? Is it more or less the same things?
Yes, I agree. I think that the main climate-related challenges in Ukraine are prolonged and severe droughts and heavy rainfalls. Droughts significantly affect the agriculture and water management of small rivers in southern Ukraine, and many small plain rivers have the runoff just for spring months, and moreover, no significant annual runoff in the last years. Since this reason, often the thick so-called choked lagoons in northeastern part of Black Sea, the lack of fresh water runoff in catchment of these lagoons leads to disruption of natural ecosystems and of these lagoons, etc., etc. Heavy rainfall dangerous not only in the mountains region, but also in agriculture regions of southern Ukraine, southern steppe, leading to soil erosion and flushing away the top fertile soil layers. So climate change impacts and will impact on the many economic sectors of Ukraine. It's really.
Diana, would the situation in Armenia, we have seen that we have both sea and drought and flood issues in Armenia. Would you say that it's more non-sea issues, but would you say it's more or less the same thing, that you have experienced drought, flood issues, forest fires maybe? Do you have those issues in your country?
Of course, I agree with colleagues. The things that Armenia don't have access to Black Sea, but it is affected by the currents and is facing similar problems as the regional, all countries in the region, and being mountainous countries. We have these mud flows, which are devastating and affecting the buildings, infrastructure. And we have a sharp decrease in the precipitations combined with the high temperature rise, higher than average in globe. And so this is bringing also another hazards as forest fires. And we have project where we was cooperating also with the colleagues from the neighboring countries for adapting or preventing the damage from forest fires, but as usually it's easy to say but not to do, because this is also linked with the conditions that are not manageable, because of course we can reduce the damage, but the temperature is increasing and the dry climate is affecting the same thing. We have the same thing of eutrophication as for the lake, small lakes, and particularly Lake Sevan. Temperature is increasing, and the blue algae are blooming in the summer period, which is affecting also the water quality. And as the colleague mentioned from Turkey, that of course there are things that unavoidable, but we can reduce the damage to ecosystems from other type of our human activities and economic activities to make it less damageable and adaptable for the situation. And here I agree also with Ludomir that is very important, this cooperation with the regional authorities and science. And this link is important, that decisions taken for the short term will not affect the risks and challenges that country will face in a long-term perspective. And the risks are much easy to communicate and give some easy solutions as a concrete walls or something, but ecosystems approach or science-based solutions are not so easy to channel to policymakers. And here is very important, this link between science and predictions and long-term solutions based on ecosystem approach to be, mainstreamed, which is not easy, I understand.
Thank you, Diana. Iraqi would say that it's more or less the situation in Armenia.
Thank you very much. I will try to very briefly say my opinion in this regard. So, as regards to the Black Sea, so I fully agree with my colleagues, definitely. So we are facing the same problem in Georgia, but I will just add that we are facing the problem of the erosion procedures of erosion. I mean the bank erosion in the coastal zone. This is due to the lack of the first of all of the sedimentation. I mean the transportation of the sediments of the bed loads because of the lack of the precipitations, because the runoff is highly decreased, unfortunately. The runoff. Also, the main problem is that the glaciers are rapidly melting. And also, this is directly connected with the climate change. And I will also add that make a parallel because of this sediment transportation. Also, there is somehow the artificial influence as well, because there are a lot of HPPs built, and this is also one of the main problems, because the sediments, the distribution of the sediments, because of the protection of the banks, are not supported. And also as regards to the disasters, definitely all the disasters like hydrometeorological and also the geological disasters we are facing, and the number are quite increasing. So I will in more details speak in my presentation. So yeah, I will stop here. And
yeah. And finally, Tatiana and Alexander, how do you stand on this? We've seen that we have both issues on lands and on littoral areas, and also at sea. How do you stand regarding Russia on this? You're from Sochi.
Thank you. I'll try to concentrate on the effects of climate change on natural disasters in our region.
I will come back 3 or 4 minutes, no more, because we will.
Okay. As for challenges for Krasnodar region nowadays, in 2020, there were 17 emergency situations in the region, among them 8 natural disasters. And previous year, there was only 1 natural disaster. So we can talk about the natural disasters are severe problems in our region, and we think that they are connected with the climate change. But we do not have enough scientific data, and when we analyzed the last decade, we had from 2 to 8 natural disasters per year with quite severe damage. So we can say that only last couple of years we have a different picture. So among the natural disasters in Krasnodar Krai were severe rainfalls, flooding, extreme hails, wildfires, and extreme frosts in spring. This year, the number of mudslides also increased because of severe rainfalls. Last decades, we can observe the constantly increasing precipitation. Sea level data in the Sochi area for the last 15 years shows that its level rise for more than 10 centimeters up, with its extreme point in 21. So we think that the problem is severe, so we need further studies and we need the exchange of data to identify the real correlation between the increasing number of natural disasters and the climate change. We clearly understand the problems of climate change, but we need further investigation in the field of connection between and correlation between extreme weather events and the climate change. So we need international cooperation. Thank you.
What else could it be, Alexander? If it's not climate change, what else could it be?
We think that there was a big, massive construction during Winter Olympics, you know, in 2014. So our ecosystems were damaged. So nowadays we try to understand the consequences of this massive event. So we, after this event, our area was growing, and we have a massive increase in population. So the impact on nature increased dramatically. So we should prove that the climate change is the it's the long-term problem, not a short-term.
Okay. Okay. So we have a global picture of what is going on both at sea and on land, in forests and in mid-deep sea, I would say. Let's switch to the second question, but first, maybe Georgios, you weren't there at the beginning. Maybe you could present yourself. Georgios Mitakis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Renaud. First of all, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for participating in today's event. And you know, as we all know, during the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has monopolized public discourse. However, we believe that climate crisis is the real elephant in the room. Rising sea levels and temperatures, mega fires and deforestation, frequent floods, droughts and heat waves, desertification and coastal erosion are on the daily agenda. The massive and devastating wildfires, which many BSEC member states encountered last summer, sounded the alarm loud and clear. We also know that climate change knows no borders. It has a cross-border impact and, of course, major socio-economic consequences. Globally, many countries and communities have to face all and more its devastating effects. The countries of the Black Sea region would have not been an exception. For these reasons is why we are doing today's seminar, because we strongly believe that international cooperation and mutual scientific support are of paramount importance if we are to tackle climate crisis. So I'm welcome you all, and I hope to share fruitful discussions.
Okay, well, what you said was a good anticipation, in fact, of what we talked about. So well done. Yes, Laza.
Well, do you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
fine.
Well, thank you very much. And I think that there was something of a misunderstanding from my side, or at least from my staff, because I understood I was supposed to deliver a kind of a welcome speech at the beginning. But anyhow, if you allow me, I would say a few words now, especially having listened to the panelists, and just a few remarks. And I hope I will be in the framework of the 3 minutes which were recommended us to follow. So, dear participants, dear panelists, dear Director General Mitrakos, it is my real pleasure and honor to be with you today, albeit only virtual. As I said already at the beginning, it is my first time as new Secretary General of the PERMIS that I participate to an event organized by ICBSS. And well, as related bodies, BISEC, PERMIS, and the ICBSS, well, for us, the Black Sea region is our main area of interest and activity, or as the French would say, our raison d'etre. As BISEC established the official think tank, we are in the PERMIS relying more and more on the expertise of the ICBSS to address these challenges in line with the BISEC's economic agenda and the sustainable development goals. Now, coming to the topic of today's webinar, and by the way, very timely chosen, and I congratulate those who selected this topic. Well, we all know that climate hazards are natural events in weather cycles. However, we are currently witnessing a scale of destruction and devastation that is new and terrifying. And as already emphasized by the speakers before me, the Black Sea region has not been spared. Only during the current year, we witness unprecedented waves of wildfires, floods, muddy torrents, overgrowth of marine mucilage, and in addition to all that, the still persisting global pandemic caused by COVID-19, coronavirus. The BISEC PERMIS has followed with particular concern all these developments, all these large-scale environmental disasters. One thing is clear in our opinion. We have to think hard on how to radically alter our relationship with nature for the better. We have to find solutions to the 3 planetary crises that threaten our collective future. I mean, the climate crisis, the biodiversity and nature crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. It is only in addressing these 3 closely interconnected that we can truly build resilience. BISEC has already taken actions towards reaching the level of coordination needed to achieve these type of goals. Just a few examples. We have set up a number of ad hoc working groups in the field of emergency assistance and hazards. Ad hoc working group on cooperation in emergency assistance and network of liaison officers on emergency assistance, and another working group of experts in seismic risks, forest fires, and floods and torrents. A number of joint projects have been implemented by BISEC together with and financed by the European Commission and other international organizations and institutions, especially I'm referring to the Black Sea Connect project, the Black Sea Virtual Knowledge Center, the Brewing the Black Sea, and so on. That being said, we are aware, of course, that there continues to be need for more intensified and better concerted efforts and coordination by the member states within the framework of the BISEC, so as to increase the capability for immediate action at regional level. That includes the need of enhancing further substantiating the work of the corresponding working groups, such as healthcare, pharmaceutics, and environmental protection. And yes, the expertise of ICBSS is extremely important in this respect. With this, I will conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Comănescu. So what we see is that we need cooperation, and if to have cooperation, we have to have teams working on the subjects, and therefore we have to have also an insight about what is happening. And therefore, it is also very interesting to gain information, to know from you when climate change issues started to appear. Because there is also, of course, a strong link between the first signs at the time when first universities scientists focus on the problem, the production of information and the sharing of information. When, for example, if you, Iraqi, for example, in Georgia, when do you think that the first issues that seemed related to climate change appeared, according to you?
Oh, yeah, it's an interesting question. So to be honest, we have quite a big lag with the observing systems, with the monitoring. So we step by step has started to renew the old observation network and even to install the new modern, I mean, the automatic stations. Also, we have the ongoing project financed by the Green Climate Fund, and the implementer is the UNDP. So based on this project, there is a full modernization of the hydrometeorological observation and the network. That, you know, to come back to your question, so in order to determine and to identify these some changes, I mean the climate changes, so you need the detailed monitoring, because as you may know, the territory of Georgia, more than 80% is the mountainous territory. It has quite complicated topography and even complicated climate. So it needs quite a dense network, and that's why. So definitely with our, I mean, the existing stations, definitely there are the places where we have fixed even the temperature, where it's highly increased. And what I want to say that the most important indicator of the climate change is the glaciers. So we annually are implementing the glaciological expeditions in the Caucasus Mountains, and unfortunately, due to the I mean the lack of the some technical facilities, we cannot do the mass balance on the glaciers, but we are doing the fixation of the ablation, and during the last 20 years, I can say that more than 50 meters, the glaciers has been melted, and with to have like a forecast for the future, if this dynamic will stay and will continue this dynamic. So maybe very soon, maybe in 50 years, all the glaciers will be disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Would you say more or less the same thing regarding Armenia?
Yeah, I can bring the witness that the first national communication and the vulnerability assessment when was reported in 1998, first national communication, there was close cooperation with the Hydromet service, and they did analysis of the trends which started in Armenia temperature registration from 1929, and they see the real trends in the temperature increase. And the last 20 years, we have only higher temperatures than average for this period. The same was for the water, the precipitation decrease. And the most obvious features of the climate change we have in the mountains, in the small lakes, which are not affected with any anthropogenic impacts. Their levels are reduced, and some are dried even in the summer period. So these are the and the most important also impact that can affect the runoff for whole year. It's the less precipitation in the form of snow.
Okay.
So the snow cover, which is creating the springs and more flat water discharge to the mountainous rivers. If snow is cover is less and it is melting more early by 15 days is melting more early. Now this is observation also from Hydromet. We have shortage, and the drought is the most devastating, even it's not so obvious as, for example, floods or mud flows, but the droughts are the most devastating issue for agriculture and economy, but also for the water quality for drinking.
Agriculture, Ukraine, of course, because Ukraine has extensive crops in soy and wheat, for example. And therefore, I guess that drought is a major issue. Since when did you start to see that things were fishy, were changing?
Yes, sure. So as climatologists, we have studied our temperature from first half of last century. I'm sorry, my phone very noisy. So we have found that statistically significant change point in temperature in the plain part of Ukraine occurred in about 1989, and then the period of rising temperature began. The increase in evaporation due to the rising temperature has led to an increase in hydrological and agricultural droughts. From that years, we have very significant impact of climate change on the agriculture and water management, urban economy, and so on. As for heavy rainfalls in summer, their intensity and number increased significantly, and monthly precipitation rate quite often falls within a very short period of time, up to an hour, just 1 hour. Such precipitation, in fact, does not interrupt the summer droughts, as it quickly evaporates against the background of elevated temperature. However, they, for example, significantly affect the urban economy. So if we consider two main factors of climate, temperature and precipitation, and the consequence for many field of Ukrainian economy, we can see that during almost 30 years, we have a very significant impact.
What about Bulgaria, Ludmil? Would you say that it's around, well, 20, 30 years that things started to change?
Well, roughly, yes, of course, because this is actually the period when we started to feel the change in climate. However, what we noticed is, I mean, there always have been floods. There always have been forest fires. But what is really changing is the frequency of high wave floods, for example. So things which used to happen once every 100 years now happen once every 20 years.
Yeah.
What used to happen once every 20 years now happens once every 5 years. And this has this is actually a challenge to our protection policy. The measures which we need to adopt have to be directed not to the traditional small-scale floods and small-scale floods, but to large-scale floods, the waves which happen once every 100 years. The measures which are currently implementing, I mentioned these are hard construction measures mostly, they are effective in small-scale floods. But as soon as we meet, let's say, a wave with a frequency of 100 years, then these hard construction measures make things much worse. So they have a counter effect. And we have to understand this very deeply to have a very thorough knowledge of the mechanism of preventing, of mitigating flood risk, so that we implement the right measures, measures which are directed, which are aiming to stop high floods, high waves, 100 years, 1,000 years, things which used to happen very rarely in the past. And this is, again, it's a challenge before the science, it's a challenge before the political world also. Because science and policy here, it's all of a chain. There are two links upon the same chain. So and the situation was interesting, of course, in Bulgaria, because unlike Georgia and Armenia, our coastal area is even. We don't have very steep slopes. We don't have high mountains, with few exceptions, of course. And there were areas where, if you ask the people, 50 years ago, there were no floods. But what does this mean? They used to have huge floodplains, huge forest floods, which means that they have a constant flood there. That's why they didn't have floods. When they dried out these floodplains, then now they have, of course, floods. Yes. In the past, there was a flood all the time, which had tremendous economic impact, which was had an impact to access to territory, because it was very difficult to pass from one side of the river to another side because of these huge flooded areas, which was they used to last for the whole season, for example, all the spring. So this is what changed, actually. We don't have those huge floodplains, and we have much more severe, much more frequent extreme events, fires and floods. But of course, I have to mention one thing which is very important for a coastal area like us. There's a sequence of impacts which we didn't follow in the past. Now, when you have let's say, a big stormwater flood, then very, very often it comes together, it is coupled by activating landslides. And the activation of landslides goes hand in hand with deteriorating the quality of bathing waters, which is very unpleasant for resort areas. We have big resort areas all over the Black Sea. We have resort areas in Ukraine, we have resort areas in Romania, in Bulgaria. Sochi is eminent, Gelendzhik, Georgia, wherever you go, Turkey, of course, not mentioning. So these are phenomena. The impact on bathing waters is very, very unpleasant for resort areas. And this is a key issue for a place like the Black Sea Basin.
Therefore, if I understand you well, we have a combination both of extreme weather and artificialization of natural spaces of floodplains.
Exactly.
That's more or less what is happening in Sochi, if I understood well. But were there any signs before the Olympic Games that things were changing in your place? Tatiana and Alexander.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I agree with the previous speakers. During last 30 years, we had signs of climate change, but we hadn't signs of increasing of natural hazards. So I can say that in Krasnodar and Sochi region, last decade, the number of natural disasters varied a lot from 1 to 8 per year. So we cannot make a conclusion of a steady growth of a number of natural disasters during last decade. So it's important. And when I talked about the last couple of years, when we see the dramatically increasing number of extreme weather events and its consequences, as we've discussed before. So we can say that we have we only can talk about last couple of years, because last decades we saw the results of climate change, but the frequency and the damage of the natural disasters were less than last couple of years. So it's a great problem, and the problem is we need much more funds to prevent these disasters. And when we are talking about complex reconstruction, about complicated coastal protective structures, it costs a lot, so we need to plan budget, and that's an issue for all, as I think, for all countries in the region. Thank you.
Boris, what do you say about this, about your issues? When would you say that trouble started? Maybe it's linked to the collection of data that's better now, but I guess there were quite a lot of signs. Most of the speakers put the first signs at the end of the 20th century. Would you say it's roughly the same period?
True, I would agree. I mean, both our results show that, our measurements show that these has started towards the end of the 20th century, and also in the Black Sea, actually, towards the end of the 20th century, we have experienced some regime shifts in the ecosystem. Like there was a collapse in anchovy and the blooms of this jellyfish, and laws were also linked to the effects of climate change. I mean, so in the Black Sea, we have been witnessing these almost 30 years ago already. I mean, Black Sea is a natural laboratory to assess the impacts of these, the combined effects of these, all the stressors. And this regime shift event that we have experienced there was one of the first that I think that we have experienced in the Black Sea. And thereon, it continued, of course. The total regime of phytoplankton, for example, that captures the carbon dioxide has changed. The bloom durations and times has changed, and the capacity of Black Sea in terms of capturing this carbon dioxide has changed meanwhile. And mostly these were directly related to global warming. There were, of course, effects of other climate indexes, but superimposed on all of these was the climate change in the Black Sea. And also this has affected the water runoff, at least on the Turkish coasts. In certain parts of the Black Sea, the precipitation has increased because of changing climate, and we have experienced seeing lots of floods in the eastern part. But on the western part, it was the contrary. It was more drier periods were more often.
Okay, So there is a strong contrast within a single country, according to where we stand. Diana, you work for the UNDP as a climate change program manager, so I guess that you must share experience with other countries. Where in Armenia, where does the decentralization of mechanism dealing with climate change stand? Is there, for example, regarding water management or forest management, what is the role of regional authorities, if any? And is there a concern, a policy concern for giving local solutions to local problems in Armenia?
Of course, for small country, it's which is not compared to Russia, not federal, that the regions are so big that as a one country to have the policy, special policy for the region, it's more centralized. But there is attempt to work with the regional authorities in planning the regional adaptation plans. So these are also stipulated with EU accession, the preparedness of Armenia, and there are certain cities have signed the Covenant of Mayors agreement, which includes also now adaptation measures. So, I mean, there is mitigation, of course, it's priority, but adaptation also is included, and these cities are developing the adaptation plans. And we as UNDP are working very closely with the scientific community, but also with regional authorities, because the problems are facing the regional authorities are affecting the regional population, regional infrastructures, but also is affecting infrastructures, for example, which are very critical also as, for example, energy supply, or the fires, which can be out of the capacity of regional authorities to fight. So that's why the vertical is created from the top, from Ministry of Environment, but there is interagency coordination body where there is also Ministry of Territorial Administration, which is planning and giving subsidies and to the communities to plan their actions, priority actions, which they identify by themselves. And also they are scientifically supported by different donor programs, identifying the key mitigation areas for preparedness to the climate change, as, for example, agriculture insurance is piloting now, or the infrastructure reconstruction for irrigation water, or the construction of reservoirs are also critical for agriculture. But also it's important that there is also projects that are understanding the underground waters depletion, which is due first of all of this aggravated use of underground waters. In the same time, affected also that the replenishment of these underground aquifers is not on the same level as was before. But this understanding came when there was acute situation when the water mirror was lowered in Ararat Valley, and the certain villages were using the artisan, these dwells are facing the problem. So the regional measures that was done was not considered such global impacts, and which was needed a bit helicopter view on the problems. So I think that this balance between centralized, more vertical understanding of problems and regional measures have to be very carefully balanced. Not to short-term gains will not affect the long-term challenges and risks.
Okay, thank you. Iraqi, would you agree with this?
Yeah, definitely, I fully agree. Because not only the surface water, as well the underground water, we have quite a big lack. in this regard. So there is another entity which is also under our agency, which I'm representing, the National Environmental Agency, but the geological department, they are working on this. They are also enhancing the number of the monitoring stations, and they are also doing the comparison with the old historical data, and it's quite highly decreased the the level of the underground water as well.
Mm-hmm. What about Ukraine now, Valery? What is the level of decentralization, if any, regarding climate issues, and how, for example, water management and forest management is dealt with in Ukraine, and is there a role for regional authorities?
Yeah, water management is highly decentralized. In Ukraine, for example, we have a basin committee as it required by water framework program of European Union. So if we consider, for example, role of regional authorities in disaster prevention and management, then at the regional level, we have some committees for commissions on ecology, nature and management, prevention of emergency. And these committees were created, and in some cases they involve also employees from Ukrainian countermeasures service and research institutions in their works. I was really interested what the committees do, and have seen a few monthly decisions of that committee in this region. It's very interesting because, unfortunately, I did not find any topics related to climate risks.
What about Russia, Tatiana and Alexander? Do you have a level of decentralization enabling you to manage local issues?
We are federation. The mechanism is quite centralized. We have a Ministry of Emergencies in Russia. So for disaster prevention and management, it's the competence of this ministry. It has its territorial bodies in charge. It deals with management of the field of civil defense, protection of the population, management of activity of federal executive authorities. Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment of the Russian Federation deals with federal executive authority, forming functions of public policy making and regulation, concerned with hydrometeorology and related areas, environmental monitoring and pollution control, including radiation monitoring and control, and functions of public environmental policy making, implementation and regulation, including issues of production and consumption, waste management, conservation areas, and state environment assessment. There are some challenges in communication according to this structure between federal, regional, and local municipalities, as the communication is rather complicated. Local municipalities have their own budget, and it's sometimes insufficient for adaptation. The programs, the local programs for mitigation and adaptation to natural hazards which are caused by climate change. Sometimes local municipalities need help from federal government. So it's an issue, but we have federal plans and ministries with their territorial bodies develop plans to mitigate the consequences of climate change.
what about Turkey, Baris? Would you think that you have a decentralized organization dealing with those issues?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the marine environment, of course, the decentralization is not a main concern, but in Marmara, for example, of course, when we had the sea snot crisis in Marmara, the cities, municipalities had to take a major role there. But in Turkey, just recently, the Ministry of Environment has become also Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change. So the climate change issues are now that Turkey has signed the Paris Agreement as well, is really on the stage, and different municipalities, different cities, they have also started a section on climate change, and they're monitoring the effects of climate change mainly on land. But we are working with them to start this monitoring efforts in the sea as well. And some of them, especially in the Marmara, they are doing it well. But in the Black Sea, these efforts are also starting. And with the Connect project, we are working in close collaboration with them. So the strategies that we develop there is adapted at the local scale as well.
Okay. Ludmil, same question. I mean, you're acquainted with the EU mechanism, which give a lot of room to decentralization, or maybe, well, it depends, not in France, unfortunately, but at least in Germany, in Spain. What about Bulgaria? How is it organized, and what is the level of decentralization? And then we'll switch to the other part of the question. Who deals with emergency plans when emergency occurs?
Exactly. Well, it was very interesting to hear from the rest of the colleagues how things are going on in other countries. So situation varies from very high level centralization to total decentralization. In Bulgaria, I would say the emergency activities are totally in the hands of the regional governments. But of course, it depends on the level of the disaster, because there's a certain level of disasters when the central authorities, the national government, has to jump in. So, regularly, those disasters which happen regularly, small-scale disasters, they're totally in the hands of local authorities and the regional government. But one important but, we have to separate two things. Those actions which come before the disaster and those actions which come when the disaster happens. They're two different things. Now, when disaster happens, of course, this is the headquarters of disaster management, which is commanded by the regional government, which has to be mobilized, has to be activated. But the most important thing in terms of climate change, the key word is adaptation. So this is the work which is done before a disaster happens. And the adaptation is also in the hands of the local authorities, because they're responsible for their general spatial plans and land use plans, and in the regional governments. And there's a very important issue, because you mentioned the European Union. When you apply for money, let's say you have a severe problem in terms of flood management or fire management, and you apply for money, be it the national funding or be it European funding, there's one key question which comes: coherence in planning. People always will ask you, okay, you say you have a problem. This problem, is it in your, let's say, municipal development plan or not? Is this problem in our general spatial and land use plan, or it is not? Is this problem in our disaster management plan or not? Is it in your environmental plan or not? So if you don't have this problem embedded in your plans, and if there's no coherence between your planning process, then there's very little chance that you can get money both from the central funding, I mean the national funding, and from European funding. So this is the key, perhaps the key element which separates those countries which are in the European Union from those countries which are not in the European Union. The EU is asking in the first place, let me see your plans. Let me see to what extent you understand why you are asking for money. What are you going to do with them? So coherence of planning, adaptation to climate change are the two key words we have to bear in mind. Thank you.
How does, Valerie, how do you react to this? That means, you know, that the EU is very Cartesian and you have to go through steps. How do you react to this type of organization? Is it something that could be wished, or do you think it's too tight?
The plans is very hard questions, really, in our countries. So we have many plans, but in some cases, realization of plans is not successful. It's really, of course, I mentioned in a previous topic about committee, and this committee works. There are many people who involved in the work of this committee, and if level of disaster is not so huge, and it can be solved on the regional levels, the financing from regional levels usually is enough to solve this problem. But if we consider, for example, what about plans on the future, what we need to do in the climate change conditions, and so I think maybe in Ukraine, main problem is to absolutely absence of the climatic services, absolutely maybe, and we need to do many things in these relations. Yeah.
Iraqi, how do you stand with this, with the idea of emergency plans, and how does it emerge, and does it occur? Has the situation
Yeah, so first of all, because I'm representing the hydrometeorological department, so our competition stops when we are issuing the early warnings about the expecting hydrometeorological disasters. But there is another governmental entity which is under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. This is the Emergency Management Department. So they are obliged to respond, to react about the disasters. So it depends on the scale, I mean involvement of the regional offices or the centralized when the central office involves in the management of the responses, in disaster responses. So it depends on the disaster scale. In Georgia, there is created this so-called situation room. So based on the level of the disaster, all the governmental entities, including my service as well, we are gathering, and we have our roles when we are involved and acting in this response, and then we are managing together with other entities. We are managing together the disaster. As I already mentioned, in the Green Climate Fund's funded project, all over the territory of Georgia, there is 11 river basins. We are investigating and assessing the hazards, hydrometeorological and geological hazards in these river basins, and based on this assessment, then we are creating the hazard maps, also the risk maps as well, and the EMS, the Emergency Management Service, they will create after finalizing this hazard maps, they will create the response plans. And fortunately, when we will finalize and create these maps, all this information and all these maps, it will have the legislative forms. So it will be the Parliament of Georgia or the government of Georgia. They will adopt this, and it will officially all the the local municipalities and all the users who want to take the permission for taking, for example, for building some structures or for registering the lands, the local municipalities, they will be obliged to guide based on these maps, and if there is some hazards or some risks, then yeah, they will reject or it depends if the hazard is the level of the hazard is the moderate, then they will require for the preventive measures, and after that they will give the permission.
Diana, I guess that with earthquakes in Armenia, there is a knowledge in emergency situation, and therefore one can guess that there is an organization always running to be able to cope rapidly with the situation. Now, does this apply as well to climate change hazards? And is there a specific organization?
Thank you. Very good question. Yes, after the earthquake, the Ministry of Emergency Situation is created and strengthened with the rescue team, and also equipped also for emergency situations, for example, for fires, and it is a continuous process. Although there is things that Ministry of Emergency is registering, and there is a database on their website about any hazards, any emergency cases. It can be fires, forest fires, or fires in the cities or other objects. Also about the mud flows, landslides, which is also related to this strong and flash rains. But the question is that my Ukrainian colleague mentioned perfectly that some things are very good planned in the paper. So we have pushed and the government adopted the National Adaptation Plan, where it's stipulated that sectors have to have the plans, and similarly as in Georgia, that there will be risk mapping, which will stipulate also the zoning and the permissions for construction to be done. But these all things can work if this will be properly reinforced, properly controlled. And also we have to consider that sometimes the economic interests are prevailing. And here is coming that I think that we mentioned this, that factual information, this science behind all this to prove which decisions can impact negatively future, because later on, if the damage will happen, the state have to compensate for these things and switch the budget, tight budget for emergency prevention or emergency recovery measures. So, but these have to be predicted with the economic figures in time, that the decisions will be taken seriously and with all precautionary measures. So similarly, as my colleague from Georgia is saying, Hydromet has early warning information with the frost, with hot weather, with fire, the fire-prone temperature and winds by TVs, and even sending SMSs. But when we are speaking about the full picture, is very important this cooperation that will be possible also to do from the colleagues from the Black Sea, this cooperation framework, and scientifically justify the political decisions. These are the critical things, I think, that have to be further enhanced, strengthened, and pushed to the policymakers as a factual information. That unavoidable, to be unavoidable for decision making
Yes.
based on that.
Tatiana and Alexander, how are emergency situation managed in Sochi and in Russia? Have any margin for action, or is it the central government that mobilizes and that comes and helps?
Yeah, in Sochi and whole Russia, all the activities to prevent, to forecast, and to mitigate the consequences of natural disasters are the functions of the Emergencies Ministry of Russia and its territorial bodies. We have no special plans that are somehow different for natural disasters connected to climate change, and we treat them as usual natural disasters and have the usual state of order. There is a national plan, federal science and technical program in the sphere of ecological development of the Russian Federation and climate changes that include emergency planning and development of measures for natural disaster prevention, mitigation and management. But it's only concept, and when something happens, we follow the rules which established by the Ministry of Emergencies. To adapt to this increase in disaster caused by climate change, when developing strategic documents for the city or region, we take into consideration the increasing amount of funding to prevent the disasters. The measures which are usually included in the strategic plans include increased funding, new equipment, special operation response team, river beds clearing to prevent flooding, modeling, designing, construction of coastal protective structures both for rivers and the seaside. Taking into consideration modern scientific researches, in order to maintain safety of coastal areas in terms of climate change, we need to provide proper modeling of coastal protective structures, and Sochi State University takes part in joint scientific projects on these issues. So I think flooding is a key issue in our region. So it's a great problem for us. Thank you.
Ludmil, we've seen until now that we have a common concern. If we look at what we have said until now, we have seawater pollution, we have drought, we have flood, we have forest fires. More or less, it's a situation we can find also in Western Europe. Look at France, Portugal, Spain. We have the same issues. Is there an exchange of information, of data flow around the Black Sea, according to you? And is there a scientific cooperation among scientific communities, I mean, around the Black Sea?
I'm for 15 years the focal point of Bulgaria in the advisory committee for integrated coastal zone management to the Black Sea Commission. I can't say I've seen any intensive exchange of information. The level of exchange of information is well below the satisfactory level. Of course, there are reasons for that. There are a lot of political tensions between the countries in the Black Sea Basin. We don't have to pretend that we don't see them. This is, of course, a major drawback. You know, it impedes tremendously the work of the countries in this basin. But on the other hand, I cannot imagine how we can govern something, how we can manage something without the exchange of information. So perhaps this is the key issue for all of us who are here today. We must find a way, even informally, if you want, to exchange information between ourselves about what's going on. Everything I heard today was very interesting for me. There were I wouldn't say there were some sensational, actually, things which we heard, but there are differences between countries, and it's very important to know them, to understand them, and to, of course, to learn from them, because we are supposed to learn from each other. But again, I don't imagine how we can, let's say, manage disasters in the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria without having information of what's going on in Turkey or in Romania, which are our neighboring countries. This is unthinkable. So the exchange of information is a very important issue. Another thing which you mentioned was the communication between the scientific community. First of all, between the scientific institutes between themselves, and the scientific community and the local authority. Well, there are too many universities now in Europe. In Bulgaria, which is a country of 7 million population, we have 54 universities. And I believe there's a similar situation in all countries. Too many universities, they compete between themselves for one and the same students. Their level of effectiveness goes down. So they're not very effective. The European Union, the Commission is trying to impose a new paradigm for the last 10 years, not very successfully, but a new paradigm for universities, not just places where they teach students. But university should be a center for supporting the regional economy, for catalyzing the regional economy. And there are a number of indicators which show whether a certain university is really in service to the regional economy or is just teaching students. So those universities which are not bound closely, which are not in support, which are not in service to the regional economy, most probably will disappear from the map. Those universities which have strong links, which have contracts with the local authorities, they will stay. And one big city, let's say a city like Odessa or a city like Sochi, like my city, Varna, not mentioning Istanbul, a city like that will have work for 2 research institutes. And this work is not done by the local universities. The universities stay away from the problems of the local authorities. They're not engaged in, let's say, in strategic noise maps. They're not engaged in the air quality programs. They're not engaged in the landslide programs. They're not engaged in the disaster management programs. The universities just stay away. They're teaching students. This is very important. It is very important for them, for their own survival, to have close links, intensive links with the local authorities. And I strongly hope that this new paradigm, which the European Union, the Commission is trying to impose, making universities not just places for teaching, but places for supporting the economy, will come to place. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a perspective for the European Union, and in my experience, I can only agree with this. Although in Brittany we have 3 universities only for us, so that it's quite a lot. But well, it's true that we have issues. Valerie, about information exchange, data exchange, and policy and science dialogue and cooperation. Do you feel that you may have something to extract from the experience of your neighbors?
Yes, sure. Moreover, I can assess the cooperation as satisfactory. For example, there are many international programs, and one program allows us to meet today and exchange our opinions and so on. As for my university, during the 5 last years, it was involved into the 2 Horizon 2020 project. One project was preparatory phase of pan-European research infrastructure, Danube-SRI, and second one is developing optional and open research support for Black Sea. In the Danubius project, the institution from Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, among other, have been participating. And in second project, DORS, also involved Georgia, Russia, and Turkey, so every country on the Black Sea region. So I think the cooperation is satisfactory, and there are many mechanisms to involve our university, any institution, and SME, and so on, so on, so on. But maybe main gap in Ukraine is bad knowledge of English. So it's our big problem. I don't know what about any other countries from ex-USSR, but Ukraine is very, very bad, and that's sad, of course. But we have mechanism to involve our university in the cooperation and have exchange opinion, data, and so on. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Boris, same question. You have an extensive knowledge on well, sea in the sea, in the Black Sea. Do you have any collaboration with neighbors, and would it be something to be wished for to intensify exchanges?
Yes, thank you. And yes, as Valerie has already mentioned, we are leading the Bridge Black Sea and Connect projects, and we are part of the DOORS projects, and also many others like SeaDataNet, EmotNet, where in these projects we share data and information. I think the platforms for data and information sharing and collaboration is there. And historically, we have been collaborating as the Black Sea countries for a long time. I think what's really missing, this also relates to your previous question about how to manage the crisis, is what we are missing in the Black Sea is the infrastructure to collect data. Yes, there is a certain and ample amount of data there, and it's being shared to a certain extent. I acknowledge there are problems with data sharing as well, but I think the main problem is with the infrastructure and the programs towards collecting the necessary data to tackle the climate-related challenges. We need early warning systems in the Black Sea to tackle these challenges. And for these early warning systems, you need continuous monitoring, which is very rare in the Black Sea, and also coastal models to show you at a high resolution and to show you what the risks will be. In the bridge project, we will partially cover these, but there is many more that needs to be done in the region.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Iraqi, same question. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, first of all, as you may know, that with Georgia, we are the member of the World Meteorological Organization, member of the WMO. So then we are obliged to share the meteorological information through the WMO and the exchange software. So we are sharing over 20 meteorological stations data. I mean, this is online. We are sharing this information. Also, we have quite a good cooperation with Turkey, with Turkish State Meteorological Service. So we are also sharing the weather radar data. So we are getting two weather radar data from Trabzon and Erzurum locations, and as well we are sharing we have started negotiations to share the new weather radar which we have installed in the western part of Georgia last year. And we already started negotiations, and we are also sharing this information. So mainly the weather radars are used for the nowcasting, which is the part of the early warning system, and this is directly related with the prevention of the disasters.
Thank you. Tatiana and Alexander, you have, I understand that you have collected quite a lot of data. First, is this data spread around? And are you collecting also information from other countries and other places around the Black Sea? And would it be imaginable to work within a framework that shares information?
Thank you. There is an issue. Sometimes the information is proprietary, and we need of further development of mechanism how to share information.
Yes.
And if it would be free, it will be great. But sometimes we can make good projects together, but it's only part of activity we need. So I think we should think about how to establish a mechanism to make the exchanging of data more easy, and it would be a great benefit in our efforts to mitigate and to adopt our economy to climate change and avoid the negative effect of natural disasters. And
yes.
Some other words from my colleague.
And I would also say a couple of words about some new project that we are involved in. It's a small-scale cruising and yachting that is we are a part of now, and we are exchanging information with our neighboring countries, with Ukraine, with Bulgaria, with Turkey, and we somehow try to make this information more vivid and open to other countries. And so thank you also for ICBSS for your center, because it was your invitation for us to take part in this project. So we're grateful for this opportunity, and we were discussing some kind of maybe ideas, what can we come up with, and maybe there is some kind of project that is named Interact, that is connected with some Arctic Sea investigation. Maybe we might make some kind of project like this, but intersea, that is connected with the Black Sea regions and with Black Sea basin. It's maybe a kind of an idea to make all countries take part and for scientific research and for further information exchange.
Okay, thank
maybe.
you. Yes, yes. Well, I'll leave that to the ICBSS for wrap up. Finally, Diana, you have the experience of working into a UNDP climate change program, so I guess that you have an extensive knowledge on the benefits of sharing information. Is it imaginable in the present case around the Black Sea? What could it be, information sharing and data exchange flow? What could it be, science policy dialogue and cooperation? And how could you see a corporate future for the Black Sea?
The one thing that is important, that from cooperation are benefiting everybody. And during my life with the climate change, I have several good examples when we have a cooperation for the modeling for the free countries, the climate change projections, and it was supported by the Hadley Center in UK. So the models were in the later trained people, and these models were used for national planning in Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. Similarly, we have very good example of cooperation on forest fires when the specialists from Turkey, Georgia, and the Freiburg University in Germany was sharing the possibilities of understanding how it is good and how cooperation between different agents in the country and also with Hydromet can be created. Good example of the UNDP and OECD supported project for the river basins, transboundary river basins from Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And of course, without covering the problems that can, as Ludomir mentioned, some tensions, that the scientists are the most immune in their relations and cooperation. I think that scientific cooperation between the universities or scientific centers in the countries can be well planned and implemented and will be beneficial for everybody. And the latest example that we have a project where 6 countries are cooperating. That project is named EU for Climate. And the most important benefit I can see is that the people are learning from neighbors better than from the internet or from the books. Yeah. Because when you see that this is working in your neighboring country, you are properly understanding that you can transmit this decision to your policymakers, to your universities, and say why it's working there and will not work in your circumstances. So I think that learning from being in a good sense jealous for the things that are moving in neighboring country can push a lot, and that's why this cooperation and transparent changing opinions and things which are going on in the neighboring countries through this any project, scientific cooperation or the data exchange network creation will be very beneficial. And the most good thing that we all benefit from WMO data and cooperation through this international network for improving the hydromet services in our countries are the evident sign that cooperation is beneficial for everybody, because some technologies, some observation systems or softwares, models are very complicated and expensive for one country. Yeah. And if they will be shared and used, can be useful. And I will urge also to look on these models also with the economic impacts, because without economic impact, scientific data will be not easy to transfer to planning and finance people decisions. So I think economic impacts of this disaster, economic impacts of not doing, and benefits of doing certain things, including the scientific financing for science or for observation systems, is very critical to be linked with its financial and economic figures. So modeling, I urge to think if anything will be planned to be also embedded in its economic benefits or economic losses.
Thank you, Diana. I was sure that was a good idea to let you wrap up the last, the last number of questions. No, it's a very good wrap up, in fact. So I will, before Georgios ends this session, what I understood is that you all shared major climate issues, both on sea with the sea snot, but it's nitrogen and fertilizers coming from agriculture, from the river basin. It's also cities having maybe some kind of better management of sewerage to make. So we have issues in the sea. We have issues of drought and flood. We have issues of forest fires. We have issues about forecasting and seeing what is going to happen, of data collection. In fact, what we are experiencing this morning is something that we share also in Western Europe. In fact, we have the same disasters or disorders. I mean, it's a permanent situation now. We have a real problem in managing what is going to happen. In land planning, we have a major issue because land planning is very difficult. It's very difficult to implement and to make people understand that not everywhere can be built anymore. This is floodplains, for example. This is an issue we have as well. We have obviously quite a lot of data in stock, but it's not shared enough. I mean, there could be, and we could improve sharing of information. and that's it. And also, and this is quite remarkable, and I was pretty interested by your answers. Like us, you date the beginning of climate change science to roughly 20, 30 years. And it's exactly the same thing we've seen in Western Europe. Now that's all for me now for the perspective, and I'll leave that to Georgios and Lazar if I don't know who will conclude, but that's all for me.
Thank you, Renaud. Thank you a lot. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for their time and participation. The webinar was exactly what I thought it was going to be. Very interesting and insightful talks. And I would like to announce that we're going to do a second webinar on cooperation in civil protection. So this is a holistic approach. First, we analyze the climate change, and then the cooperation in civil protection, because we saw this summer that it's going to be a very hot topic to the years to come. So once again, thank you all. I hope to see you again in one of our webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, colleagues.
Thank you for
so
the
much.
opportunity.
Bye.
Thank
See
you
you.
very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.